the aspects and elements of the different stagings that I do in the installations that have existed so far try and kind of compress and extract and extrude different kind of aspects of the visuality and the textuality of the work. So this room I've chosen to use a very Picasso-esque kind of yellow, I guess. Try and really exploit the way that he was such a strong colourist. And also it kind of ties in with the late 60s performance of the play, which was overtly psychedelic and late modern period. So there's a kind of sense of designing as well, designing the space. I want also to construct a kind of climate in the installation where things have a certain vibe or a certain tone or tenor that kind of ties everything together. I want the room to have a kind of a thickness in the air which a vibrancy and a kind of density of colour hopefully achieves. And also it's been chosen partially also to complement and to create some kind of dissonance with the objects in the room as well. I came across the play by researching a band I love called Soft Machine, who are an English psychedelic jazz group, and realising when I was researching their chronology that they played in the performance of a play by Picasso called Le Désir attrapé par la queue, which is a desire caught by the tail. And I knew Picasso had written a couple of things, didn't know much about them, I certainly had never heard of this play. I thought it was very interesting that something that was written in the Second World War and never staged only had its first real proper staging with props, costumes and scenography in the late 60s, and Soft Machine were the band that played during this. So it was quite, I thought it was a bit interesting thing to kind of compare and contrast and extract moments from both of those and combine and collide them. So I guess the whole project is essentially an extended montage with historical moments and physical moments and images. So it's all kind of this big machine that combines and juxtaposes things from both of those. So in that sense, it's kind of like an extended musical moment where ideas like repetition, discordance, the whole idea of a chorale or a symphonic moment with lots of different voices that combine in a kind of a collective assemblage is it's a big part of the play and a big part of the way I think about the play. So in both moments, both iterations of the project, Picasso's reading in the 1940s and Labelle's staging, the people who played all the characters were already very well-known people, so they brought their own kind of voices to the project, and I've tried to, as much as possible, have the performers that I'm using in my performances be someone who is active and known in the cultural arena. So always the characters are representing themselves as characters, as abstractions, but also they're representing someone who brings their own identity and voice to the project.
Hey, 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 hey.
He was bleeding everywhere and screaming incoherent words like a lunatic. Je me suis laissé entraîner par les vagues loin des rives. Pied pour toi.
Demi-quart de melon d'Espagne,
répondre
de
à mes
linge,
questions.
de l'huile de
Quand je suis
sale,
sortie ce
tachée de
matin
sang et
de
d'excréments.
l'égout de notre maison,
Dépêche-toi, ma sœur.
tout de suite,
la soupe est déjà
à
froide.
2 pas de la grille,
Elle se fend au fond
j'ai
du
enlevé
miroir de
ma
l'armoire
paire
à
de
glace.
gros souliers ferrés,
J'ai brodé
de
toute
mes
l'entière
ailes
après-midi.
de
So all of my projects tend to somehow negotiate this idea of time in art as a continuum. So most of my projects have an overarching title of continuous moment, and this refers to this idea closer to the way I make the work in the studio as this concept of that the artist is constantly making one continuous work, and there are fluctuations and variations, and there's stops and starts and parentheses around certain projects in terms of content, but essentially the artist is constantly making and thinking about work, and this extends into one continuous moment. The other meaning that it has that's specific to the way I make the work is that I feel like I like to work in a kind of a historical continuum where other people's works that have influenced me and that have come and are yet to come kind of exist in in one fluid space and time. So this usually ends up, this always ends up being represented by the fact that other artists are always very present in my work. Yeah, I think the work is about authorship. I've always found that I feel that when I make my work that other authors are always involved, and that's always very present. It's also a way I think about the work as a kind of montage and collage, which means definitively that things that exist as components and have they retain their own individual identity, but they're also contributing to a larger voice. So they exist as what they originally were. So the components in this work, some of them are quite untouched and they appear as they would have originally appeared. But when they are combined into an ensemble or as kind of a symphonic structure, they're able to exist and contribute a different voice to what they originally were attributed to. So I think it's important to have that going both ways, I think. And that lends itself to this idea of authorship, because those individual components are authored by other people. So they retain their own sense, their original voice, but at the same time they pivot around that idea and contribute to a voice that I'm kind of pushing them into. This spinning disc is actually one of the only props which actually existed as an object with a story that connects both plays together. So it was a prop from the play where there's a scene in which all of the characters win the lottery repeatedly. So again, there's this idea that things happen and are repeated as forms and events without consequence. So when Lebel staged the play, he made this into a prop which used Duchamp's rotoreliefs from his anemic cinema project. And the interesting story which connects those is that Jean-Jacques Lebel's father, Robert Lebel, was actually the first person to write a monograph on Duchamp. And Lebel himself was a member early on in his life of the Surrealists, and they evicted him for being too controversial. So this says something about the way Lebel approached the material as being I guess a kind of a countercultural moment. This is also something else that's quite interesting about both the plays, is that in their own way, when I first came across them, I thought that it would be interesting to combine them because the aesthetic of the time and the politics of the time and the social geography of those times were so vastly different. But as I worked more into the project, I realised that they were actually both really significantly countercultural moments, and the 44 reading was done under curfew due to the Nazi occupation, and the 1967 performance, the mayor of Saint-Tropez attempted to ban it because it was too, I guess, controversial due to certain parts of the play, nudity and so forth. So in their own way, they were both actually quite similar, and Picasso was very excited that Lebel was staging this and attended most of the performances.